Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Mastering Retention podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have Kristina Miles on. We're going to talk about all things UX, UI, which we haven't really done, maybe like one other episode previously. But I think UX is just such an important part of user experience. And, especially when we're thinking about things like Fatui flows and, just how much of a drop off we have and how important the user experience is from the very beginning. I'm just so excited to dive in. Anyways, well, before we do, I always like to start with, Kristina, what's your story? Like, how did you get into games and how did you end up working at Electric Square doing UX?
Hi, Tom, and thank you so much for inviting me for this session. So my story. I actually ended up in game industry very accidentally. I had no clue how I applied for this job, for my first job. Sorry, it was an Electric Square, but yeah, it was very accidental. I came to the company, which was 5 minutes from my home, which was very convenient. And they've been talking about the project, asking me questions, and I had no clue what's going on and what I supposed to do. But somehow it worked. And I started working with this company. And the first project that I've been working on was CSR Classic, which was ended up quite big. And I think it's top grossing game for a very long time. I don't think so that it's top grossing anymore, but it was for a couple of years.
There's CSR too, so you're close enough.
CSR now it took the whole, like there was CSR Racing, which I was working on as well, but CSR 2 took the whole glory from all other CSR projects. So yeah, it was very accidental, but originally my background allows me to work with the user experience because I've been doing user experience and UI for the web and for the applications, and I also have the graphic background as well, so graphic design. So that's basically accidentally, but I'm very happy. I even took 1 year off to think about, do I want to stay in the game industry? So I decided to go to do master on a very random topic. Not random topic, it was communication design, but I still not related to game exactly. But at the end of my master, I actually did a game project. So it was obvious sign to me that I actually like what I'm doing.
So before we dive into stuff, can you define for people that maybe aren't aware of what UI UX is or why it's important? Like what is user experience design?
Well, user experience is basically the experience, the player's experience. It's everything what they see, everything what they think, and how do they go through one screen to another screen, how do they communicate with the game, how the game communicate with them, the feedbacks and all this just. So it's a lot of things. It's not necessarily only buttons like some people think. It goes further. It has a lot of overcross with the design. It goes a lot of things that kind of like overcross the art part. For example, if we're talking about environment, there could be some language that could be part of the game design, that also the user experience. So all these things, it's user experience. And of course, it's already found very important and like it's everywhere.
Yeah. So to maybe like wrap my head around it, do you have an example of something maybe you worked on somewhat recently where you came in and you saw this screen, like what was wrong with it? And then how did you, go in and fix that?
All right, that actually, I do have an example of that. So the recent published project that I've been working from not very, very beginning, which usually what I prefer, I really like to start with very beginning. I started working with this project in the middle of iPhone, and it's called Detonation Racing. It's on Apple Arcade. And I've been looking at the post race screen when you get your information about how you did, and then when you see the information about the challenges and how much stuff you get from doing cool stuff in the game. And it was very, very confusing because it was a lot of rewards going on after each other that was related to different things in the game, like for your progression in the game and for the dailies and the main campaign. And it was very confusing. So because you just receive a lot of things at the same time, you don't know what's going on, why. And we've been working on these couple screens, on the rewards, on the information, and on the animation, which is technically the feedback as well, when, how it's appear, make them different, or some elements make them same because they actually the same thing, why they looks different. So it was not only one screen, but it was a couple things all together, like post-race feature that I've been dealing with. And there was more stuff like that. So yeah, I do have a story, you know, when you change color of the button and you like
you didn't see a 300% increase for changing the button slightly?
Yeah, I've read a book about one of the designers. He said, like, I changed the button to green and massively increased monetization. And like, what? Well, that might be true, but I don't have stories like that, unfortunately.
I see some guess the CPIs for like hyper casual games on LinkedIn, and it's like one of these had a 50%, you know, drop in CPI or something. I can never guess them, but you know, kudos to those who can. But you know, back to this example of yours. So that sounds interesting, and I feel like I could maybe identify that as a problem, or that, you know, something maybe needs to change there. But like, how do you actually approach figuring out like what needs to change and how it needs to change and why? Maybe like, do you try to, I don't know, play the game a lot yourself? Are you trying to like talk to a lot of users? Are you using surveys? Like what's your process?
Well, depends on the stage of the game. We do play test. We have rapid play test. We have, you get, for example, data after LiveOps from your telemetry. That is great. So at first, you probably need to understand the design. You need to talk with designers to figure out what we are trying to achieve. We need to align on goals, what a particular feature is supposed to do. We need to think about the audience, the player, how do they look like, not visually, of course, but who they are, how they're going to play. Are they going to play on the sofa? Do they want to play with their friends and stuff like that? Their preferences, how long they're going to play and stuff like that. All this information are extremely crucial for the user experience, because something that you do can actually increase stickiness and can be very enjoyable. But other things, when your audience are different, can actually be, I don't know, extra frictions, and you want to like cut them off. Or for example, you actually want to add something to the game. So it's a lot of things. I would say probably like alignment on goals, alignment on our players, and alignment on how they're going to interact with the game and when. So when you know that, that's when you can look, you can play by yourself, you play with your colleagues. Perhaps you can have some studio tests, or you can have some online services that can provide you with different players, and then you can see, does this work or it doesn't work, and so on.
Yeah, that's interesting. You brought up something that I've kind of been noodling over for a while. So one of the, I think, most effective ways to group your players is by looking at their overall play behaviors. And what I mean by that is, like, some of your players might, you know, play once per day, but it's like a 2-hour stretch from like 7 to 9 p.m. And then other players might play like 20 times throughout the day, but it's like 3-minute, you know, little increments and stuff. And I think the way that those people play are going to be vastly different. So my question, is it ever appropriate to think about some sort of segmented UX design where players that behave like this actually see a different version of the game or different versions of the screens than these other players, so that we can best serve what they typically like to do within their gameplay experience?
Well, perhaps if the game design will allow you to do that not necessarily that you will do, especially if you are doing a game casual or super casual. So you, from the very beginning, you know that you're going to have very different players with very different skills, and during the life cycle of your game, you will have noobs, you will have players who stuck with your game for years. So I guess that would be very expensive solution for this problem. So if you have different players and you need to change overly how the game look like, that might be a little bit more expensive. Again, there could be a thing. You can unlock things and stuff like that. You can upgrade a personal environment where, for example, the player customize the characters, cars, forever. So it's a lot of solutions for that, but I would hardly imagine that you can completely change the game. Or again, if you have a lot of players, you may think about adding different mods for the game. So for example, some players will play a bit more with a single player campaign. Other players may, they don't want to play often, but they like to play for a long time with their friends. So maybe PvP in this case, offline, online. So yeah, you can add things for different players, and that makes sense because you really want to attract as much players as you can. But all these things should work together, right? So it still should feel like one experience. So no matter what you're playing, what color of your homepage look like, it's still the same game. So yeah, why not?
Cool. Thinking about, like, what is maybe the best way to work with a UX designer? Like, is it to come to you and say, okay, Kristina, I have this game. Let's do League of Legends Wild Rift, because I just played that a bunch to do a podcast episode recording, which was fun. I had to delete it because it was absorbing me into it again. But one interesting change that they did in Wild Rift while I was playing, getting ready to do the podcast, they released a client update. And previously, when you won the game or lost the game or whatever, like the in-game screen, it would just kind of show you how you did amongst, compared to everyone else. But then they added this change in with the new version. I don't know if it's still there, but at least it was the last time that I played. And after that, how you did screen, you like click through and they pop up and it's like a results page. And they brought in all of your different like LiveOps, daily quests and things that you're working towards. And then you see, oh, you have dropped 4 out of 5 wards, or you've played the mage 2 out of 3 times now. And all these things, which I imagine, like, to me, triggered psychologically of like, oh, I just need to do one more game and I can play the mage, and I'll make sure that I do the ward, and I'll do these couple other things so that I can like get the full, unlock and rewards. But all that to say, is the best approach to come to you as the UX designer and say, okay, Kristina, we're trying to figure out how to get people to go from, let's say they're currently playing 3 games per day to 5 games per day. Like, is that a problem that they would come to you with? Or, what's the best way to approach it? Like, is it based around the problem and then kind of unleash you?
Well, there could be different ways we can go this way. From my experience, I would say I'm starting at very early at the project when there is no design basically at all placed. So it means we are creating game from scratch altogether with designer. So we are dealing with these challenges together. And it's really hard to say because, the projects change very massively during the production to production period. And sometimes these kind of challenges came from designers that want to add a little bit more attention, which you just described quite a good retention mechanic, because it's like a hook that asks
Yep.
you to play again, or then you would remember, then you return, and then again you will play it and play and play. So yeah, but yeah, as soon as it's possible, I would say you would benefit start working with a designer, a user experience designers, definitely. You don't need to wait till all design are placed, because it's much harder to change something, especially if it's like a core experience, because it takes more time, it takes more resources. You don't want to do that. So you want to bring all people straight away, and then even more. So it depends on the game. The game that you just said, they have not only one user experience, they have actually user experience team and UI team separately. So yeah, as soon as you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. At what point in the, let's say, player flow, so I'm not too versed on Apple Arcade, but let's talk about like maybe standard mobile, of like where typically the player sees an ad, they click the ad, see some screenshots, click in, download the game, etc. Should the UX designer be incorporated at the point of like the creative design that goes into the ad, or like at what point in that step do you come in? Like, is it only after you've downloaded and opened the game and you get into the Fatui, or could a UX designer be incorporated at the very first step and then into designing the screenshots and all the way through?
Yes, I think you should incorporate the user experience designer straight away. And it's slightly hard for me to say, because I'm user experience and UI artist as well. So things that visual is also part of what I'm doing. So I'm definitely doing thinking about the kind of screenshots that the best represent our game, what action sense is the best. When we do promo videos, it's also like on my shoulders, and it's not only me working, but we're working with our small team to deliver all these assets, marketing assets. So definitely, yes. Who else is going to do that? You need a UX designer for that.
So basically, if people want a good UX designer that can do lots of things, they should reach out to you and try to recruit you away, huh?
Yeah, probably. Well, I'm not the only one. I think in the game industry, still, in even big companies, you will wear a lot of hats. Not only when you user experience design, I guess even when you're a designer, you still wear a lot of hats. Anyone in the game industry, lots of hats. Just prepare yourself. Once I even did liveries for cars, because it was fun to do. I was interested.
Wow.
I knew how to do that. I had a graphic background. I know how to use 3D programs, so why not?
That's impressive.
So yeah, it's a lot of things that you're going to do. So that's just prepare yourself. That's fun. You never do the same thing all over again. So it's always a lot of cool stuff. That's why I like game design, actually. Much, much, much better than working with boring bank applications.
At different stages of the game, you say you like to kind of come in early stage in the game. Do you typically start with kind of wireframing out, like, here are the different screens and here is how each screen is going to kind of connect to each other?
Yes, I think something visual that you will see first is going to be some wireframes and have some flows even, because at the very, very beginning, you wouldn't have as much details to have like, the bar with a lot of details, but you will need to think about the core flow, the flow itself, how to fit different features together. So it's going to be maybe less detailed flows and wireframes that you're going to talk about. Think about how does it connect to the design ideas, and on the background, you also will start thinking, if we mix user experience and UI a little bit on the background of that, you also start with art, thinking about how the game going to look like, what we're making. It's going to be also a lot of documentation at the very beginning. It's always a lot of documentation. You shouldn't underestimate how much stuff you need to write. And I guess you will think about your audience at this time. So there will be some players' profiles and user flows. Yeah, definitely user flows.
So, for the skeptics that are listening, why do I need to bother with, user flows and things like that? I'm just trying to make a game. Why is it important to have flow screens?
Because that's how you will know that you're doing the good game without finishing that and found out that you're missing something. So it's like step-by-step work that help you to do less mistakes and verify stuff on the way that you are building it. So it's really, really helps. Plus, you work in, well, depends on the size of your team. I guess, again, when we return to what we've been talking before, that in game industry, we are wearing a lot of hats. So if you're working in a small indie studio, that you're probably an artist, UI artist and designer at the same time, which is fine. But if it's a bigger group of people who is doing game, you need to communicate your ideas and visually, not only visually documents and stuff like that to other people, to directors, to your clients as well. So that's how you're going to do. No one going to wait half a year happily sitting till you do the game and they like sign and give you all money. You need to sign all steps, and the clients usually wants to understand what you're doing, so the flows also help to do that.
Yeah. So, maybe to distill that down into some basic understanding of myself, if I have a game and I want to have an inbox in my game, I need to at least have a basic idea of, from the home screen, how do the players actually get to the mailbox? How does that mailbox screen actually open up and, roughly look like, so that I can actually have a plan? Because if you don't have the right plan to begin with, it might get buried somewhere and it takes like 5-6 clicks and players will never be able to even know that there's a mailbox out there. So you'll not even be able to really use it.
Exactly. Or it could be placed in a very crowded place. There could be no space on the screen. That happens with mobile games quite a lot, actually. As far as we all remember, mobile screens are very small, and we have fat fingers. So all things that needs to be, the thing that a button needs to be finger size at least. So flows really, really helps. Again, you're saying you have a game. At the beginning, you have no game. You have just idea. That's why. So the flow help you to understand that actually your idea works. So it's for designers, for all other people to understand, because again, that's a very cheap way to actually play test at the very, very beginning. So you may have not much in engine at the moment. For example, there could be a couple squares that driving around. So you can test, you can start testing base layer, but what about your retention layer? So having a flow, and again, it's much quicker developing that in wireframes rather than doing this in engine. So it's a lot of reason why you should do that. And we just named a couple of them. So and things that you said as well, where this button, the first question, why do you need inbox? So that's the first, I would probably say, that you need to question. Is it something that your player is going to use? Is it part of the design? And then when it needs to be, at what part of flow it will occur. So all these things are very important, and user experience really helps to do this right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You did touch on something that I think is pertinent, and I remember my first real startup, where we ended up going international. There was some location in the UI where we'd have hot as bolded exclamation point, and it worked really great. And it was like 3 years, and finally somebody notified us that like for the Germans, hot is like this crazy long word that like destroys the UI. And I don't know how it was like so utterly missed, but like uh, I don't even think those German users like could have, used it. So I think we just always thought, oh, Germany's just really not that strong, but maybe it was just because of the terrible, terrible experience they were having. So, with that in mind, how do you design with localization in mind? Because, you might call out inbox here, but inbox in Russian might be 3 times as long. So, and, how do you design for that?
So there are a couple of tricks. First, yes, different languages have different lengths. Think about Arabic that completely swap from right to left, left to right. So that's even worse. And then when you think about languages like Japanese, Korean, Chinese, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese, that's very like it's very different. It's not like English, nothing. So firstly, you think about that. You definitely, for UI artists, I would say, think about font. Your font should support other languages. Localization is very important. That's your retention mechanic, that accessibility, it's a lot of things. So you need to think about how to translate your game to other markets, and think about font. It's very hard to find font that has all these options in terms of languages. So that's, I guess, small advice for, I guess, less experienced people. So another thing that what I usually do, because I know that, yes, German, for example, can be much longer than English, some important like buttons or areas in the game, some titles or something like that, I'm actually tend to test in have Google Translator. You might be not correct. And of course, like I speak Russian as well, so it's easy for me to check Russian or all European languages as well. It's very easy because the Google Translator is doing a very great job.
Yep.
I'm struggle with Chinese and Arabic and Japanese and etc. Of course, you might have a lot of people in your team that can help you as well. Think about that. You can use this resource. But that help you to understand, for example, that next button that you plan to have very small is not going to be small. When you build an engine, again, you think, oh, then let's make this flexible. For example, it can shrink down, but then it needs to like shrink down the button next to it because they like two together. So it would look odd if one shrink down in size and another. So it's, it's like, it's not hard, but you need to just keep this in mind. And it's good that you ask. It means you're thinking about that. We're thinking about it all the time. All games that I've been working, all games have been translated to 16 languages. So it's something everyday life. And of course, sometimes something came from the bug report that, some word that's extremely long. And again, we return to the company who does translation for us. We're asking maybe it's possible to actually change to another word because quite often languages have synonyms, right? And you can use one, and you can use another. That's another way. And if it's really, really long, that's probably maybe you need to think about the English word. Maybe you need to change that one as well. Yeah. So it is tough. You definitely, if there is a button, you don't want to make button that takes the whole screen. So you need to do something with it. You either change the size, you either change the translation, you can change the word. So different things. So be flexible. There is no one silver bullet what you need to do for that.
Do you find for buttons, you can sometimes get away with, using icons instead, or can that be confusing too? Like I see a lot of mobile games, they have a continue button at the bottom, which again, you probably have enough synonyms that you can do that, but could you replace that with a simple, triangle for play or like continue or something as you'd see in your Netflix, which I feel like is going to be more synonymous across, all countries? Or, do you see that sometimes it's better to have text?
Well, you can, some buttons you can replace with icons. Sometimes you can support icons with text, but it's not the solution for localization, because there is no way how you can exchange text for icons.
Yep.
Because, I don't know, yeah, continue, next, back, it's easy, but if you think others claim, for example, it's not going to be universal. It's not going to be universal on 16 languages, 100% sure. And even when you do the game for kids audience who doesn't know how to read, in this case, yes, you definitely use less text, but still, because some games kids play with parents, so they can ask some support from parents. So having text and icon, sometimes better idea just having text and no one understands it. Child doesn't understand, the parent doesn't understand, no one understands. So yeah, that's hard. Still, you can't replace text with icons. I wish I like icons, but it's not the solution.
Okay, I have one final question, and I'll leave localizations alone. What's your typical recommendation on how to work with, let's say I want to start bringing my game into the MENA regions where, you know, Arabic and some others, they read right to left. I have to orient it. Or, you know, sometimes, you know, I remember doing translations way back in the day where I'm like copying and pasting them in, and I'm worried that I'm pasting it even in like the wrong order or whatnot. You know, do you typically just see the game, you know, if typically you've got your text up here, have a inverted version of your game to support them, or, you know, do you see something else?
So we have some magic code that does this for us. And we have localization sheets with all languages in tables that usually filled by localization company that does it for us. So it's not much that you are doing in terms of user experience or UI. It's something that bugs, if there is a bug, you will going to fix that, or UI technical artists, for example. But the way how it's actually done in the game, well, if you have programming skills, that you would do that. If not, then it's going to be
little magic, huh?
Yeah, and again, translation. Personally, never copy any text to maybe at the very beginning of the project. You know, when it's not cyan. Because localization, again, it goes through a lot of agreements, because you don't want to put any root words accidentally or anything like that. So that's something that you verify with a lot of people. But it's basically, it's a code magic, so that everything is flipped. So yeah, that you need to ask, you need to invite the coder for your podcast to ask about it.
Get some magical coders. I love it.
Exactly.
Okay, so jumping back a couple steps, we had our flow chart that you should probably outline before you really start coding. How can / should you plan for future features and screens? Like I see it in a lot of games, especially. It seems like they weren't really planning for, let's say, LiveOps or for, you know, something in there. And, you know, you start with this like really pristine first time user experience. And then, you know, a year or two in, you keep throwing in all these like new features, and it's just like it's so hard to navigate around. And I think for like your elder players that have been there the whole time, that slowly get these new things, it's okay for them. But for someone that comes in like a year after that, they just have no idea where they should be going or what they should be doing. So I'm just curious, like, when and how should you plan for, hey, this is going to be something in the future, or hey, we're launching without LiveOps events or weekend events or something, but it's going to live here in this screen. We're just not going to make it right now. And then it's going to, you know, kind of branch off from there. So I'm just generally curious, like, should you roadmap those things out for like 5 years so you have designs?
Well, that's a good question. So you will definitely benefit if you can roadmap some LiveOps features or further features. Definitely, at least to have a plan for first year of LiveOps. That's something that you should try to do. That would be very unwise to, to never think about what's going on with your game. You need to believe in your game. That's first. I think that kind of comes together. But of course, you wouldn't be able to tell what will happen with your game in 5 years' time. The people will change in the team, the designers, the UI artists, everyone, that's normal life for any game. And your audience will change as well. So you wouldn't be able to tell as much. But planning for first year, that is very important. Again, you don't need to implement, but actually that's such a good task for user experience artists and for designers together. You don't need to think about, like, maybe you still need to, I guess, estimate with the code team. And it would be easy to estimate as soon as designers and UI artists do their work, because they can explain the code team what technical part we require from them to do. So that is important. That is definitely part of production, part of planning for the future. And when I'm working, I always try to think about, oh, well, that's the campaign. We have like 5, for example, events. I'm sure we're going to add more. Then think about it. This needs to be scrollable. Talk with code team and tell them, well, we're not going to scroll now. We don't have budget for you to build this feature. But when you do it now, think about that in year time, someone or maybe you going to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's how it works. So you think about as much as you can, plus you do planning with your team, with the production, with the designers, with directors, and just be prepared that there will be something in LiveOps that you never heard about before, something absolutely new, and maybe perhaps you even need to like rework a couple screens because of that. Top bar, bottom bar, I don't know. That's fine. That's games.
I like it. So maybe on that note, how should UI UX be included in LiveOps? Let's say maybe new LiveOps designs. Like, okay, we're going to be working on a new feature, which is let's say like a tournament event. So we're going to be creating that with dev for the next 2 months, and then we're going to launch it. How should someone like you be included on that? For designing out so that we have a smooth experience that players are going to enjoy and engage in?
All right, so LiveOps. So again, depends on game that works very differently. For example, most of my games that I've been working, we do have LiveOps, but our LiveOps are mostly like content, new content creation, which is usually means that your team is very small. And when you think about Fortnite team, right? Their LiveOps team the same as I think their LiveOps team actually bigger than
probably
when they start doing because now they're a big company, right? Yes, you do need to work together on your LiveOps stuff, on new features. You need to include designers, depends on the feature. The tournament actually is quite a big feature because it's a lot of new screens. There could be some new elements, and you need to integrate this new thing in your old flow. And you maybe need to change your Futuri as well. So it's a lot of work, actually. It's not tiny little, not extra banner for an extra event, right? That's much bigger. So you definitely will benefit if you will work with UI UX artists. For example, on one of my projects, our LiveOps tournament was actually quite a big feature. We even was working together with YouTubers. So we did a photo shoot with them.
Wow.
And there was a lot of YouTube pre-warm videos, how do they play, and it was a very, very big campaign. So your LiveOps feature
You still there?
One problem with the connection.
Oh, cool. Okay, we're back. We'll edit that part out. Okay.
I will continue. So you can, as soon as you know the feature size, you can think about how many artists you need, how many people you need for this feature. Maybe you need to add a bit more artists, for example. Maybe you need to add a bit more user experience. Maybe you need more programmers to do this feature. So it really depends what you want to bring in your game.
Yeah, that makes sense. So almost, to kind of answer the question myself, you should probably have the UX designer working early on with the game designer and maybe the developer to spec out what are the screens that we need for this, what existing screens need to be changed or tweaked or edited so that it flows into our large flow diagram that we have for the player experience, right? And then from there, you can take a look and say, okay, we know exactly what we need to do. Now we can, either assess out how many people we need or how long it's going to take and kind of plan accordingly into our roadmap.
And one more, I would say that user experience helps designers to actually build a better game, because we are looking at same thing from different perspective, from different point of view, that actually helps to make the feature better and better for the game, better for
Yeah. I guess, with the UX in mind, and I'm thinking about LiveOps. So LiveOps, when I'm designing an event, I want to, I guess I want to think about it in a way of how can I reuse this event such that a year from now, it's still going to be fun and interesting and engaging for my players, because I don't have a lot of resources like, maybe for Fortnite we do. We don't have a lot of resources to make brand new events every single week, every single month, right? But we want to make one holiday event and give it enough flexibility and controls that I can change it so that while it's still the same back-end UX design and JSON that's powering it, it feels different enough to players that it's fun and engaging. So maybe the Valentine's Day event, you've got 3 reward tiers, but the St. Patrick's Day, now there's 10 of them and it lasts for 2 weeks or something like that, and with different goals or something. How would UX, play into a little bit of that design with the game designer? Is that kind of a, hey, here's the event that we're thinking of doing, and you kind of put together a wireframe and say, what are the pieces on here that you want to be able to control, you want to be able to change, ideally in your over-the-air LiveOps tool?
All right, that is a great question, and I think most of the time, wherever you're doing, you want to reuse in the game, because bringing more and more stuff to game, it's impossible. There is always cut off in terms of how much new new objects you can bring and stuff like that, because otherwise players will wait for an hour to download your game. They only do this for Fortnite. Anyway, so yes, you think about that in advance. You think about that, for example, you want to change simple. You can start simply from, that colors, for example. We can have different type of rewards in events. There could be a couple of rewards. So you just plan all these things at the very, very beginning. Again, when I've been given an example before about LiveOps game that I've been working, and we did the first events was with YouTubers, and then obviously you can't all the time make with the YouTubers because it's too expensive. So we decided to do just cars instead. So we just replace the colors, we replace patterns, replace rewards, replace everything. And we build a system that allows you to do this cheaply. And we think about all these things in advance. There was a lot of different elements, and there was a guidance how they need to work with different systems. And it was basically like a framework. So at the end, we created a framework that tells you what to do in different things. And it was very, very flexible. So you just think about that. I just don't even know how you can do something in a game that's not flexible enough. The flexibility for everything for the game, it's very, very important. It's like must have for most of the features. You know that things are changing, you know that you need to modify them. So you keep this mentality all the time with you when you design something.
Yeah, I like that. So final question, as you kind of triggered something which I wanted to ask about too. I think oftentimes in today's games, there's lots of spots within the game where I think it makes sense, kind of a triggering action, or if a player does this, I want to be able to react to it, whether I'm popping up some sort of offer or a in-game message. So like I enter the arena for the first time and I want to pop up a message and give them the gladiator armor and unlock a new event where they're working towards winning 10 battles so they get their gladiator sword or something like that. Do you ever design for these sorts of trigger points of like where I want something to happen, and at what point in the game design overall, like does it make sense to think about those?
That's for sure. That's definitely part of the user experience, that the players feedback, you are doing that all the time, even feedback like simple, when you press button and it does the sound effect. It has some animation. It can squeeze, for example, very cute animation. Not often you have enough time to build something like that, but all these things are important. How, for example, pop-ups appear on the screen, when they appear on the screen, what these pop-ups contain. Do they have like titles? Do they have iconography? Does anything moves? If there is two things, do we have that attract animation? And it's a lot of things. So you need to kind of think about all these things logically and group them, because again, the good thing when you do the same type of feedback, visual or graphical or audio feedback for same things and different for other things, it means that firstly it's great accessibility design. And also it helps to teach players so they will know about something without even realizing what they're doing. And then that's really great. So you need to think about all these things. For example, when you get new stuff, you will have a peep, for example. When you want to just attract something, it will shake in particular way, and all elements will shake same way, and all peeps will, again, do their own animation and look exactly the same. Maybe you will need to have two types of peeps, so that will help players to understand what's going on. Same with the audio as well, that is very important. So like buttons that do things like next, 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 or play, 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 they will have their own color, their own sound. The way how you press, the way how the button react would be one style. And for example, I don't know, buttons that you press to buy things, or going back, or just agree on the pop-up, like okay, or close or something like that. They will have their own style and own logic, and you will think about that. Same for the feedback. So yeah, that's something that user experience do, and that's part of what we are doing. And yeah, you try to just group things. So you make your life easier, you make developer life easier, so you don't give them constantly different things. So they need to implement, and it's easier to maintain after as well.
Yeah.
In LiveOps, for example.
That's great. Cool. Well, I have one more unofficial question, because it is the Mastering Retention podcast, of course, and that is, what's one tip or trick or lesson you've learned over the years to boost and increase retention? Like, how do you keep your players playing for longer?
I would probably say I try to spend lots of time with polishing the futui, because that helps players from the beginning loving your game more, and also it helps new players to understand. So that's where I would probably focus the most. It's not helping to retain old players, but again, it can help make the experience of players who played did some gap and they want to return back good enough, so they stuck with your game again. So that's something that is extremely important in game, and we know that because day 1, day 7 retention is, these numbers are crazy, right?
Yeah.
So the Fatui is really, really important. So don't leave it to the last minute, please.
Love it. Well, that's great. Well, Kristina, if people do have any questions for you, is there a good way for them to get in contact with you?
Absolutely. You can ask me a question on LinkedIn, or you can write me an email, I guess. LinkedIn, I think, is better way.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.